It was a very cozy month. Hey guys, welcome back. Let's do an October wrap up. I'll tell you what was good, what was bad, and then we'll go through my TBR for November and also some new releases to be aware of for November. Also, just wanted to make a quick announcement. This is possibly, I think it will be, the last video with this background. Just so you know, I am doing some renovations in my home office / library, reorganizing everything in a different way. So expect that in the near future into the new year. So for the next few months, I'm unsure if I am going to film in one section of my house for the rest of the year that looks completely different, or if I'm just going to film in random spots. But be aware that it's gonna look different, but we're gonna have a fresh, fun, new look for 2024. Now let's get into October wrap-up. First was Morbidly Yours. This was a lovely romance novel that's available on Kindle Unlimited. This novel takes place in Ireland with the main character, Lark. She is grieving the death of her husband. She moves to Ireland for this animator job. The other main character is this undertaker named Callum, and he's grieving the death of the grandfather who raised him. So this novel is dual point of view. The main characters are these lovely opposites, with Lark being bouncy and optimistic and fun, and Callum being reclusive and shy, and he has a little bit of a stammer, and they're neighbors, and almost immediately they start becoming just best of friends, and they spend all of their time together, and they help each other out, and they grow as people together. In the meantime, there's all sorts of intermixed feelings during their friendship. So it was a spicy, slow burn throughout the book. I would peg the spice level probably around like a 3.5 out of 5. It was just lovely. I read this back at the beginning of October and I am still thinking about it. And this is a debut novel. So going into it, I had no expectations, but once I started reading it, I was just blown away. It was so heartfelt and entertaining. One night I ended up staying up until 2 a.m. reading it, and I never stay up that late. Like, I'm a strict, it's 11 o'clock, time to sleep. But I could not drag myself away from this book, so I definitely need to get a physical copy of it, but it is available on Kindle Unlimited. If you have that service, you should definitely check it out. Okay, next is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. So this is the Owl Crate edition, but I actually read the book on Kindle Unlimited because I'm not very nice with my things and I didn't want to gunk this beautiful edition up. Like, it's just so pretty. Another very lovely read. It's a dual point of view novel from Iris and Roman, and they're these young rival newspaper article writers. The book is this fantasy novel based during a time of war between the gods in their world. So Iris's brother is away at war, and she tries writing to him via letter, but instead of her letters delivering to him, they magically are transported to Roman, and they start corresponding and they become close, but Iris doesn't know who she's writing to. The characters were so vivid in this novel. I felt everything that they were going through. I felt their pain and their helplessness, but also their triumphs that they had. Also, I loved the romance aspect. I felt like it was really based off of the letters that we got to read that they exchanged with one another, but we got to see how they communicated and how their romance grew over time. Now, this book is a duology, with the second part coming out, I think, at the very end of 2023. FYI, this ends on a huge cliffhanger, which has me dying to read the second novel. I'm very, very excited to see where the next novel goes. Next was What the River Knows. This was released at the end of October. I read it at the beginning of October as an ARC. I had been really looking forward to this one because it's by the author of the book I really liked, Together We Burn. I feel like I talk about that book all the time. I always reference it. I really, really like that book. So when I saw that this one had an ARC, I requested it, it got approved, and I was like, so excited. So this one is about a young woman, Inez, who travels to Egypt to find out what caused her parents' deaths. Now, this book is labeled as YA fantasy, but it felt more like historical fiction with touches of magical realism. It takes place in the 1800s, and Inez's uncle and parents were a part of this team who were trying to find Cleopatra's tomb. And in this world, the artifacts from the tombs that they find have bits of magic ingrained in them. But basically, she starts sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. And also there's this other side little romance type thing with her uncle's assistant. I personally didn't feel the chemistry there. I didn't feel it. Like in Divine Rivals, that's also young adult, but like I felt it. But with this one, I was just kind of like, I don't know, I don't believe you. I do think that the book had really good storytelling and writing. Just personally, I wasn't invested in the plot. I get it. Inez wanted to know what happened to her parents, but then everybody was telling her that nothing was safe and that she needs to leave it alone. And basically she just disagreed the entire time. The setting being in Egypt in this historical time frame was a cool idea. I just found the book to be a bit boring. Plus, going back to Inez, I didn't love her. I was just so annoyed with her. She was naive and immature, and I wasn't rooting for her. So that makes it really hard for me to enjoy the book because I'm like, I don't love the main character. Also, I was a little annoyed with this one because it ended on a cliffhanger, which is fine. So did Divine Rivals. But nowhere in the book description or synopsis, anything, indicated that it was going to have a sequel. And that pisses me off. I probably wouldn't have read this one at this time or as an ARC or whatever if I knew it ended on a cliffhanger, especially when I have no idea when the next one is coming out. I'm mad a little bit because I want to know what happens in the next book because we left so many things unresolved, but at the same time, I didn't love it and I don't like Inez, so I want to know what happens to her and with her story, but I don't want to read a whole other book about her. Next was Icebreaker. This one, another one, wasn't for me. I think I'm getting too old to read about horny college students. Basically, this one's about a hockey player and a figure skater from the same college who start banging. The actual plots for the book that's described in the premise doesn't start until about the 50% mark. This book was definitely way too long. It was spicy, if you're into that, but I found the majority of the book to be pretty boring. There are trigger warnings for eating disorders and this really toxic friendship throughout the book, and both of those take up a good portion of it. So didn't know that going in, be aware of that. But overall, I was pretty unimpressed with it, which is good to know for me, because now I know that like I don't need to revisit this author again, especially since her main characters are college-based. I can just be like, okay, I know we're done, and I can just continue to not read college-aged books anymore. I just think I've aged out of it. Return to Us. This was my random TBR draw for this month. So I originally got this book from a bookworm box back when that was a thing. The edition is beautiful. I will give it that. Although I did start reading it back when I got it in the box, and it didn't grab me. This time, though, I was able to finish it. So this book is a second chance romance novel. However, the novel did not include the typical flashback chapters like most second chance romance novels do. The characters and everyone around them was talking so much about how the main characters used to be so in love, but we never read about that. So for me, I didn't feel that romantic connection between the characters. It was just the author being like, trust me, they loved each other so much and you should want to root for them and have them be together again. But I was like, I don't really feel it. Like, I really think that the heart and soul of these second chance romance novels are the flashback scenes from when they were so in love that it guts you now that they're not together. And without that, I'm like, I don't know, be together, I don't care. So quick little synopsis, the main character moves back to her hometown after an accident to recover. Male love interest still lives there and he's a single dad now. Pretty much immediately they're just drawn back together. I mean, it was fine. I probably won't ever think about the book again. And then spice level was also pretty low. I wasn't very excited by it. I think mainly because I didn't feel the emotional connection to the characters. Assistant to the Villain. This was fun. So this book was written based off of the author's TikTok series about an assistant to the villain. Now, I haven't seen the videos, so I can't compare how the book lived up. I do know a lot of people enjoy the video collection she has. Personally, I went into this blind. I actually bought it because of the sprayed edges. When I see like a special edition book that like is just out there, like on Amazon, that's like sprayed edges, I'm like, yeah! I don't regret the choice. So this is a fantasy / romance novel about Evie, who gets a job being the assistant to her kingdom's villain. And the kingdom literally refers to this character as the villain. And that kind of shows you how this whole book kind of is. It's very cutesy, and you definitely can't take it very seriously. Because of that, I do think it was a very fun, low-level fantasy read. Like, it was just goofy, and the world building and the magic wasn't very, like, in-depth. It was very easy to understand. So it's a really good palate cleanser. So the villain character in this book basically has an office building where he has all of these employees that are working there. So we have a lot of fun little side characters. And in the office, the premise is that for the book is that someone is trying to sabotage the villain, and our main character, Evie, is spending the book trying to figure out who it is. So I finished reading it and I was like, that was cute. And I read some of the Goodreads reviews and I saw that some people are a little pissy about the romance or lack of romance / spice. So just a heads up going into it, it is barely a romance novel. Like, obviously, the villain and the assistant seem to be into each other, but nothing really happens regarding the romance aspect of the book. The book did end on a cliffhanger, which I wasn't mad about because on Goodreads, it had the thing that said book 1, and she has other books out there pending, so I knew it was going to end on a cliffhanger, so I wasn't surprised by that. So I am excited, though, to see where the series goes. I mean, I thought it was a fun read. The Unmaking of June Farrow. This was the Book of the Month poll winner for October. Thank you to all who voted. If you don't want to miss future polls and videos, whatever, be sure to subscribe to the channel. So this one I was really excited about. So it's about June Farrow, who's determined to end the Farrow curse that has plagued the women in her family for decades. She also wants to find out what has caused her mother's disappearance. Now, I loved this author, Adrienne Young, her other book, Spells for Forgetting. I just think that her writing and the way she like creates an atmosphere and tells a story is lovely. So I loved that one, and I really loved this one too. I felt like she did the same sort of emotion-provoking, atmosphere-creating writing. I anticipated I was gonna love this one, and I did. So I do have a full spoiler talk about this one out there if you wanna check that out, but just know I had to take my time reading this one because I had to actually pay attention because there's lots of names and lots of dates, and there were many times where I was like, what? But in the end, everything tied together really nicely, and I really, really ended up loving it. Now, A Study in Drowning, I got this in the September Illumicrate box, and it was the perfect read for the fall. The setting in the novel was on this cliffside, and it was cold and rainy, and it just made for the perfect cozy read. So this is a bit of a fantasy novel, but it's also dark academia novel about an architecture student, Effie, who is selected to redesign the house of her country's recently deceased beloved author. So this author wrote this fairy tale fantasy novel, and it's just extremely well loved by the entire kingdom. While at the manor, she meets a literature student who is there to do research about the late author, and together they end up discovering a bunch of secrets. Now, this book felt more mature than a young adult novel. If the characters wouldn't have been in college, I don't know if I would have considered it young adult. Now, my favorite parts of this novel were actually when the author of this novel would do little like bits from the fantasy novel. She would do little snippets and like paragraphs and stuff from her fantasy novel. I really want this author to actually write that fantasy fake novel as an accompaniment to A Study for Drowning. That novel, Anna Garrett or whatever, sounded so good. It was about this mortal woman who was taken by a fairy king. She falls in love with him and then she destroys him. If this author were to write that book, I would be so excited. I mean, she already like partway wrote it. She has the premise and a bunch of passages in this book. She might as well just write it. The last book that I read was The Good Part. I read this as an ARC. This novel is set to release at the beginning of November. It's a time travel novel that felt a lot like the movie 13 going on 30, but it was 26 going on 42. Now this author, Sophie Cousens, her books, I've read the majority of them. They do tend to feel the same to me, but at the same time, they're enjoyable. Her books are always these quick, easy reads. For this one in particular, the main character wants to skip ahead to the good part of her life, and then she suddenly finds herself 16 years into the future. She's married, she has kids, she has her dream job, and she's confused. My favorite part of the book was actually the author's imaginings of this future world. It was set 16 years from current, so that was really fun to read about like her imaginings of it. On the other hand, I didn't love the main character, especially in the beginning. I found her to be annoying. And I almost stopped reading because I just thought that she was so taxing. But I do have to say I'm happy that I stuck it out because she does have some really good character growth in the end. So I do think that the book was worth the read. Now, moving on to TBR. So normally I select a random book from my little jar from my TBR shelf and trying to cut through all of my physical TBR books that I need to read. For the rest of the year though, I'm not going to do that, but I have 2023 releases that I own on physical book that I'm like, I have to read before the end of the year. I don't know why. In my mind, I'm like, okay, you have to read them because they came out in 2023 and you bought them, so you have to read them. So that's my goal for the rest of the year, is to read through my 2023 releases that I physically own, just so that I can feel better about myself. So throughout the rest of the year, the books I'm going to be talking about are going to be 2023 releases. After the Forest was a Lumicrate's October book, I think. And then we have some romance novels and then a couple of novels that I found from thrift stores that are Book of the Month related. And then a couple of other Illumicrate special editions. Also, of course, my Book of the Month pick for November. The poll winner was a romance. The name escapes me at the moment, but I will be reading that. Also, like everyone else who has read Fourth Wing, I have Iron Flame on pre-order. So when that comes out at the beginning of November, I will also be reading that. Now, here are some November releases to be aware of. Of course, Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros, Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood, The Good Part by Sophie Cousens, Hunt on the Dark Waters by Katee Roberts, Inheritance by Nora Roberts. All right, that is it for me today, guys. As always, thanks so much for watching. I hope you find some awesome things to read in November. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.